Okay, so we're going to talk about portion sizes or portion distortion. So first of all, your portion size is specific to you. So I can give you guidelines, and there's guidelines on packets, and there's guidelines on food pyramids and all of that sort of thing. But basically it is specific to you. It's specific to whether you're male or female, how tall you are, how heavy you are, how active you are, and how old you are, because all of those things affect how much energy you need in a day, and therefore what size your portions should be. And therefore I really like the system of using a fist size serve for your carbohydrates and a palm size serve for your proteins, because that is specific to you. If you're a 6-foot man, you're going to have a much bigger hand than a 4-foot woman. And it's the same, you know, with portion sizes generally. If I look at my portion size, it's going to be very different from a woman who is taller than me and has more muscle than me. And it's also going to be different for some of my clients that are 4 foot nothing and have no muscle. So it really is quite specific to you. But the portions have distorted. They have got bigger. They've got bigger in restaurants. They've got bigger in packets. They've got bigger in everything. And if I look, so this is the dinner plate that I use for demonstrations. That's what I eat off. This is another dinner plate. And that is a distorted dinner plate, you know, so you've gone from that to that, if you can see those. It's quite a big difference. And some are even bigger than that. And if you look at a cereal bowl, gone from that to that. And my mother-in-law's, I actually kind of inherited part of her old china. And really, her plate is the size of a side plate compared to what we use. And the most dangerous one of all is the wine glasses have gone from that to that, which is just crazy. So we're very good as human beings of filling things up, and we're very good at not stopping when we're full, but eating everything that we see on our plate. So we need to be really, really mindful of that and watchful of that. Lynn, I'll come back and answer your questions, because the way I'm set up at the moment, I can't see them and talk to the camera. So I'll come at the end and I'll do all of the questions at the end. So yeah, so I'm a great believer in fist size. So for instance, my carbohydrate at lunchtime, my kumara is fist size. If you were having a piece of chicken or steak at night, it would be about your palm size with the fingers cut off. And about the same, I think you asked a question on the thickness, it would be about the same thickness, which is a typical old kind of Weight Watchers way of knowing whether you're in the right, you know, you're in the right zone. And also, you know, I often talk about, you know, your plate, a quarter of your plate should be protein, a quarter of your plate should be carbohydrate, and half of your plate should be fibrous veggies. But then that does relate back to the size of the plate you are using and the size you are and how much energy you are using in a day. Another thing I use is a child's handful of nuts or trail mix or scroggin, which is probably about 20-25 grams. But I think it's much better if you can trust people to use that, you know, that of a child's handful rather than getting the scales out and weighing things. It's like if you're doing a piece of cheese, it's a matchbox size. So it's looking at those things. And as I've said throughout the course, remembering that your stomach when it's empty is the size of your fist. That is all. So, you know, if your stomach is the size of your fist, why are you eating that? You know, it has transitional cells. It has the capacity for about 1.5 liters. It can stretch, but do we want to stretch it to overfull all the time? Not really. And that kind of goes back to the Okinawa Islanders, who are the longest living people. They're one of the blue zones, so they have the most people over 100 in the world, along with Sardinia. along with the Seventh-day Adventists in California. And there's one other in Greece. So there's 4 main blue zones. And those Okinawa Islanders, they have a saying, which is hara hachi bu, which means basically eat to 80%. And they say it like we used to say grace, or we used to say, you know, for what we are about to receive, may the Lord make us truly thankful. We used to say that before they eat, they say hara hachi bu, which means only to 80%. So they are kind of practicing their own version of calorie restriction. And maybe that's because they come from a place of scarcity where there wasn't a lot of food around. Certainly in the first 50 years of their lives, there wasn't a lot of food around. But you know, they've created that culture where they are restricting calories to that amount. And we know that restricting calories to a certain extent, now don't go mad on this, but it is a way to live longer, because it actually slows down the rate of oxidization. So oxidization is like rust. And when we're constantly having to break down foods, we get oxidative stress, which is like we're kind of rusting from the inside. So it causes inflammation. So whether you choose to eat 3 meals a day or 2 meals a day or 6 meals a day, if you can restrict your calories back down a little bit, you're probably going to live a longer, healthier life. So I think that's quite interesting. You also know that, I'm into not 7+ a day, probably 10+ a day when it comes to fruits and fibrous veggies. For women over 40, I would say only have 2 to 3 pieces of fruit a day. And a piece of fruit is about a tennis ball sized apple or pear. So it might be that it's a couple of kiwi fruit is 1 serve. That 3 little easy peel mandarins are 1 serve. That I use these little bobby bananas, like a bobby banana is 1 serve. Half a cup of berries is 1 serve. But again, the serve of fruit that a 6-foot man needs is going to be greater than the serve of fruit a 4'11", 70-year-old woman needs. So be sensible. You've got to bring it back to you. It has to be specific to you, which is why people like to have one-on-one appointments with me, because then we can make it a little bit more specific to you. The other thing is we all should be having, and this is specific to you, 4 handfuls of fibrous veggies a day. That's how much of that stuff we need to look after our gut flora and to get all of the nutrients in that we require. And that is specific to your hand size, so that's going back to, I can eat a head of broccoli at night easily. That's 1 hand size. So, it's going back to that. And I eat, so things like this cute little buttercup squash, I would just eat that freely. But with the more starchy vegetables like corn and potato and rice and pasta, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a minute, it is about that fist size. Okay, so that's giving you an idea of that. Other proteins, depending on where you're using it, it could be 1 or 2 eggs. So 2 eggs would give you about 16 grams of protein. So if you were using eggs for your lunchtime protein, that's how much you need. But if or your breakfast protein, that's how much you need, unless you've got another protein in there with it. Or it would be 1 egg if you were using it as a morning tea or an afternoon tea. Falafels, depends on the size of the falafel and what's in there, but it's going to be somewhere between 2 and 4. It might be 4 of those little falafel balls. It could be 2 of the bigger, those cool gardener falafels, which are a little bit bigger. 1 to 2 vegan sausages or lean sausages, or the Bean Supreme sausages. 1 patty of lean meat or plant-based patty. What else have we got here? The little tins of tuna. You want to be careful with tuna because of the mercury. So I would only eat it a couple of times a week. And for most women, that wouldn't be enough. So if it was a lunchtime meal, that would be enough for a morning or an afternoon tea with a couple of crackers. But if it was your lunch, you might want to add an egg to it or have something more with it. I do use these little snack times, as you know, and I do use that for lunch. But if I use it for lunch, I'll have other protein in there. I'll have some hummus or something like that in there as well. So I just nudge, or some other beans or legumes or a sprinkle of seeds, so that I just nudge the protein up a little bit. Mainly for things like your lentils, other legumes. It's about half a can as a serve for a meal for most of us to get enough protein in. Same with baked beans, it would be about half baked beans. So that's just kind of to give you a few examples. I think another trap that women often fall into is that they end up eating the same as their husband or the same as their growing teenage boys. Although I don't think even I could keep up with Barnaby when he was a growing teenage boy. But, you know, often you look at your plate and you end up eating the same amount as your husband, and we just don't need that many calories. So remember, if you are overweight, you are eating more than your body needs to function. So many times we need way less food than we think that we do to actually do everything that our body needs to do in terms of repair and growing hair and skin and nails and exercising. You know, any calories more than that is going to be spilled over into your fat cells and you're going to store. So without, you know, it's being mindful of that. But it's also knowing that if you're eating a plant-based diet or predominantly a plant-based whole food diet, in quantity, you can eat a lot more for a lot less calories. You know, so for instance, in those long-lived places in the world where they're predominantly eating stuff that they've grown themselves, you know, they're eating a lot of vegetables with a very small amount of meat or fish, sometimes a small amount of goat cheese or sheep's cheese, maybe sometimes a little bit of goat or sheep's milk. And that, you know, that's about it. But when you're only eating like that, you can eat a lot. And for me too, I'm able to eat more now than when I was younger, because I was constantly yo-yo dieting and messing up my metabolism. I kind of ended up in a situation where I was living on 12 or 1300 calories a day, but only able to do it for a few days at a time and then binging. And now I can eat 17 or 18 calories a day and still lose weight. But I've engineered my body to do that by drinking enough water, by eating protein at every meal, by doing my weight training. So my metabolism is actually higher now than it was when I was 20 or 30, which is great. But sometimes if I'm truly eating a plant-based diet, it's hard for me to get that many calories in. You know, so instead, I'm not actually thinking about restricting calories at all. I'm making sure that I've got enough calories in there to get all of the nutrients that I need. Because as women, even if we're sedentary, we need 1200 calories a day just to be able to do the bodily processes that we need to do, just to get enough nutrients in. And that's why when I see people who've been doing paleo or keto or something very restrictive and their hair starts falling out and their nails start to break, it's because they haven't got enough nutrients in, because their portions are too small or they're restricting their calories down too low. So that is really about all I wanted to say. I have got some other examples. So for instance, the chicken, the sun-fed chicken, you can get away with just 50 grams of that because it's really high in protein. Sometimes I have 50 grams, sometimes I have 100 grams. If I have tofu, it's about the same as meat. So when you're looking at that palm size, it's going to be between 100 and 150 grams, depending on the size of your hand before you cook it. So I do the same with tofu. So for me, my palm size is about 150 grams. And so I do 150 grams of tofu. which is like having 150 grams of meat in terms of the amount of protein that's in there and roughly the calories that are in there. So that's how I gauge that. Things like, you know, remember these konjac noodles that we're using at the moment, they are basically made from vegetable. They're made from, it is turned into flour, but it's basically konjac noodle flour. Konjac is like a kind of a daikon. It's a long, like a radish, long thing. And that's what they're made from. So you could eat the whole packet of those. So if you ate the whole packet of those and they were wheat-based noodles or rice-based noodles, you'd be getting 400 or 500 calories easily. If you eat the whole packet of these, you're getting somewhere between 20 and 40 calories. So that's the big difference. Things like popcorn. Popcorn's deceiving because if you pop it yourself, so if you just pop it yourself in the microwave, just stick it in a brown paper bag and twizzle the ends and microwave it. Actually, I've got a video of me doing that. I'll have to post it for you guys. If you do that, you can have 2 cups of this because it's obviously it's all air. So I do use measuring cups quite a lot. So I have several sets of measuring cups. And depending, so things like your rolled oats, I generally, depending on how much exercise I'm doing in a day and how cold it is and how much exercise I've done that week, I will use anywhere between 1/4 of a cup of my oat mix and 1/2 cup. So somewhere in there. But again, it would depend on you. It would depend on your age, your height, your weight, how much exercise you're doing, all of those things to find where that sweet spot is for you. And sometimes if you've plateaued and you're trying to tweak things a little bit, just going down from 1/2 cup to 1/3 of a cup or 1/3 of a cup to 1/4 of a cup, whether it's oats or rice or quinoa, can make a big difference over a week and you don't really even notice it. So I don't want you guys to feel hungry. I want you to feel satiated, but I want you to be aware of not overeating. And one of the reasons they reckon that those Okinawa Islanders, because I can't say Okinawarians. Yeah, I did it. Okinawarians. One of the reasons that they do that to 80% full is that they know the wisdom. They know that it takes 20 minutes for their brain to recognize that their stomach is full. So they know that if they stop at 80%, the chances if they wait 20 minutes, they will be replete. So you don't need to eat beyond that, you know, because it takes time for your stomach to produce ghrelin, which is the hormone that tells you leptin tells you that you're full. Ghrelin tells you that you're hungry. So it takes time for that to happen. So it's just that thing of eating slowly. Be mindful of your portion sizes. Remember that your stomach is only the size of your fist. Look at the size of your plates and your bowls and the size of the people around you and how much they're eating. You know, if we ate a whole food diet and we ate when we were hungry and we stopped at 80% full, that is a natural way of eating. And if we were all eating in that natural way, we would be at our natural weight. So the problem is that a lot of the things that we perceive to be normal foods now aren't normal for our bodies. And we overeat them. And you know, very often our brain doesn't even get the chance because these foods are highly concentrated. So if you're looking at chippies and lollies and crackers and, you know, baking and stuff like that, or a donut. So a donut that's that size might give you between 300 and 600 calories, depending on what's in it. And a head of broccoli that's that size, you'll be lucky if you end up, it will give you about 30 calories, but you'll be lucky if you get 10 of them because most of them are insoluble fiber. So you're not even going to get them. So our brain has these small amounts of food and it doesn't feel full or replete from them because they're small amounts, and we're actually designed to have an abundance of low calorie foods rather than a small amount of very concentrated food. And then there's the added problem that those concentrated foods give us that dopamine hit, which is like having a heroin hit, which, you know, basically builds an over desire for food. And I think that's really sad, because we end up trying to fulfill a desire for food and putting our energies into a desire for food. Whereas if we were getting our joy from other things in our lives, we wouldn't be so fixated on food. I'm not saying we shouldn't get some enjoyment from food, but it shouldn't be a fixation like it has become. Other things for you. So this is one of those instant brown rices. For most people, it's about half a packet. Half a packet's too much for me. I would have a third. So one of these, if I use them, would last me 3 days, not 2, not 1. I have some clients that eat a whole one. And I've had clients that I've had to, you know, 1 is too much. So 1 is like, oh, it's probably about 600 calories if I look at this. So that would be 16. Yeah, not far off, about 500 calories if you ate the whole thing. And a little bit more. Yeah, nearly 600. And, you know, I've had clients, because they're so used to overeating, that I've had to let them eat the whole one of that at lunchtime with a protein and some veggies. And then it's been a slow process to gradually take them down to 2/3 of it, and then half of it, and then maybe a third of it. Because in their brain, they're so scared of feeling hungry and not feeling satiated. So I think that's quite sad. Things like, you know, if you use natural things like these lentils, look, a serve would be a whole cup, because again, they're way, way lower in calories. Pasta, it would be about a cup cooked for most of us. So that, it kind of gives you an idea. I think I judge an avocado about the same, like it would average out a little bit bigger than a tennis ball size. So when I'm eating these little ones, I count a whole one as half of a medium. So when you see on my plans that I've got half of an avocado, it might be a whole one of these for the good fats. So I hope that that's helpful, that's useful. Have a look at the portion sizes that you're using. Make sure you're getting enough of the good stuff, not too much of the other stuff. Look at the size of your plates and your glasses and your bowls and the size of your body. And if you're not sure, flick me an email or a message and I'll come back to you. Now, just see. Oh yeah, yes, it is the thickness of your palm as well for your protein. So it's about the same size as your palm with your fingers cut off and about the same thickness. All right, guys, I hope that that was helpful. And, you know, everybody tries to upsize us. They want to give us a large fries or more because the perception is that more is better. But is it? And when you think about more of being better, what are you thinking about? Are you thinking about whether it's better for your body or whether it's just better value in terms of monetary? But, you know, there's a lot of supersize me people out there who are paying McDonald's to end up later in life with diabetes and heart disease, and it costs you way more. So don't think of food in terms of having to get your value, have to get my money's worth. I've got to eat everything that's on my plate. Those things are really thought errors that we need to work on and we need to change. Okay, guys, see you later. Have a great day. Bye.